welcome everybody. This is well, I'm not quite sure how to characterise this meeting. It's a sort of and without being disrespectful to Julia, who's going to tell us all about Waters Resources, but we've had a couple of extra meetings over the last few months to talk about the green stuff. And as we go through the minutes, last time it was a really good meeting from Transport East with Andrew Summers and Jessamy from the county, talking a lot about the elderly housing. And I think we agreed that we weren't going to call it elderly housing. I know it's in the minutes, but it's more sort of supported living or active living, active retirement, and potentially supported living, because we must always remember there are people of working age for whatever reason, and when the health service does some wonderful things to keep people alive, sometimes there are adverse consequences, and it falls upon us, A, to look after them with social care, but B, to find housing with them. So I think we have a look there. Anyway, that's by way of introduction. I think that's given a few more moments for people to join us as well. So we're going to talk for about an hour, till about sort of 11:30, because it's a restricted agenda today. And I hope also at some stage when we get onto the local plan update, officers can just give us an update on where we are, because the Greater Norwich local plan is going to be inspected next week, or the first thing. So for those people outside the Greater Norwich area, that's really immediate. We can talk about some of the issues there. Okay, so let's talk about the minutes. I've sort of done those already, really. If anyone's got any comments, we had the stuff from Andrew Summers talking about Transport East. The importance of Ely Junction, of course, is really important to us there. And since then, and I'm not sure, is Andrew on the call? He's not. There have been some announcements about money that's been given to us in the last month. So things are doing well. Okay, elderly housing, I think we just demonstrated that probably just needs to be supported living and active retirement, I suppose, is the way there, Durams, and we've all agreed to chip in a 10 grand, Broads 5, and the county is providing Neenan in kind. Any comments on? I don't see any hands on the minutes. No, good. Well, in which case, it's my enormous pleasure to introduce Julia. Where are you, Julia? Better turn your camera on so we can see you. From Water Resources East. I know certainly that. Welcome, Julia. Yeah, I know where we sit. Anglian Water provides my water, and actually, although I live in the countryside, they take my sewage away, which is fantastic. But I'm conscious that's not the same where it is always. If you live in Yarmouth, there's what I call it Essex and Suffolk water, but though I think it's Northumbrian now. Does that work? But then that's just the potable water stuff. There's all the stuff about flooding and abstraction, which is an important part of our economy. So as I recall from a previous presentation that a colleague of yours gave, Julia, there's about 200 or 300 members in this Water Resources E. You have the enviable task of herding them all together. And with that sort of introduction, obviously a very brave and formidable lady, I'll hand over to you, Julia, and you can maximize your screen, or we'll share your screen, or do whatever you wish. Thank you.
Hi all, thank you very much for that introduction. I'm not sure whether I'd be summarised as formidable, but I'll try my best. Right, let me just see if I can get this presentation sharing. I had some problems with it yesterday, so I'm kind of praying that's going to work for me today.
About 20 minutes to half an hour will be about right. Now, aim for 11, I think, then we would be suitable, but we're in your hands.
That's fine. Yeah, so I've got a number of slides, but I can whiz through some. Obviously, the slide presentation I will send out at the end. So you can have, you'll have all the extra detail, even if, we don't go through it all today. Just bear with me 1 second, because the presentation slide is not showing properly at my end for some reason. Just as typical, isn't it? I'll just give you the introduction while I get the slides.
Yeah, we can see them clearly on our screen if it helps.
Brilliant. Okay, no, that's great. Okay, so Water Resources East is the regional water company for all of the East Anglia region, going down to Essex, for example, and up into Lincolnshire. And so there's a number of water companies that make up the supply and, as you said, wastewater collection or water recycling services, as Anglian Water call them, within the region. And just to, obviously this is following on from a previous conversation, but with Robin Price, but just in case if people weren't at that, what's different about Water Resources East is that compared to some of the other regional water companies in the country, and there's a regional water organisation for each area of the country, is that the Water Resources East area is not just dominated by public water supply, being the single kind of largest user of water resources. Agriculture, industry and processing of all sorts of products, including those from agriculture, and energy are significant users of water within our region. So Water Resources East is much more about collaboration. And that has therefore designed and defined our approach through our work, and has really kind of explains the reason that we're taking a slightly different approach. So as you just mentioned, John, our Water Resources East is made up of a stakeholder group of nearly 300 organisations, and our board is made up of a real range of stakeholders, from people like those involved in CABA, the catchment-based approach, to the NFU, and then obviously the water companies themselves. So today I'm not going to focus anymore on Water Resources East itself. I'm going to talk you through the consultation document that we currently have online, and some of the thought that's gone into that. So on the screen you can see some background to all the engagement that we have been doing. So we've had 17 engagement events, some regional and some catchment level ones, and then we've taken our board through some quite focused topics to make sure that the board of Water Resources East, because they come from quite diverse backgrounds, are in a position where they feel they can comment on and shape the direction of the Water Resources East regional water resources plan. So just to highlight really the engagement there is so important to us. This is probably background that some of you will be very familiar with. Eastern England is obviously one of the driest regions in the UK and is seriously water stressed. But on the other hand, leads in agricultural production, has some incredibly important environments, and also has the highest forecast of growth outside London. So at the moment we use around 200, I always struggle with this word, with these numbers, 2,311 million litres of water, because I'm not very spatially aware and it's an amount of water I can't really even picture, but it's quite substantial, I think, is the point there. The chart shows how that is split down within the region. And while public water supply is still incredibly large, we can't underestimate the absolute importance of this 339 million litres, because that really provides the kind of economic underpinning of our region in terms of the products that we produce and how our communities live.
Yes, normally that's done by Olympic swimming pools, isn't it, or double-decker buses?
Yeah, and I should have done that.
Or the size of Wales for some reason.
And so what's noticeable here is that's what we use today, and then on the right-hand side is the figure for the amount of water we need to find. So this is additional water needs by 2050. Now, you can see straight off that those numbers it's almost the same again. It is important that I make clear that there are some subtleties in these bars. So some of them, for example, it's not necessarily that the demand is increasing, but of the 2,311 million litres that we use now, some of those sources need to be closed down. They're not sustainable anymore, and therefore we need to find a new source equivalent to that. So in that sense, there's some double counting in these numbers, if that makes sense, but we still need to find that amount of water, but it's not necessarily that it's a complete doubling. And demand forecast, I'll talk about a bit more as we go forward, is demand management, things like efficiency, leakage, are incredibly important in this region, as in any other, in terms of reducing the water need. But there are some other significant considerations that are going to impact us. The environmental needs, that is to clarify where we, for example, can't abstract from groundwater anymore, and maybe need to look at abstracting further down directly from the surface water flow, so that the rivers rather than the aquifers. But factors like climate change and housing growth are talking about genuine extra growth, unless, for example, demand management can have such a difference that everyone is super efficient. So I'm not going to go through this in detail because I'm conscious that it's really, really small. But it's just to give you an idea of the process that we are kind of going through, and the fact that we have a plan that's phased from now to 2050, and that because some of the solutions that we're going to need to produce those extra 2,000 million litres of water are quite significant, that some of those solutions can't be delivered within 5 years. They maybe need 15 years, for example, to be able to come forward. So we have to have a plan that considers what's needed now, but also considers what we can deliver and when. So I'll go through some of these solutions a bit more in a moment, but it's a range of things from considering reuse of effluent, for example. Can effluent be treated and reused so that it could provide water supply for agriculture, for example? Can we look at recharging aquifers somehow? Can we look at local storage, large reservoirs, desalination, trading, piping water from other parts of the country, and obviously work around household efficiency, retrofitting, and leakage. So demand management is, as I said before, really, really important, and it is considered that demand management could provide enough water in terms of water saved through efficiency that could balance out a significant amount of the new water demand that is needed. On the left-hand side, you can see the sum total of the solutions that are being considered in the regional plan. Now, the important thing here is that this 1,800 megalitres per day, not all of those solutions, as we've started to work them through, are actually feasible. So they're not all going to be delivered. Which shows that there is a gap that we still need to find from that 2,000 megalitres that we discussed earlier. So on the right-hand side, again, there's all of these different options that are being considered. As I said, only some of them will come forward, and that exact balance of what comes forward is still very much being worked on. There's still a huge amount of work to do. So it's really important at this stage that I emphasise that never before has there been a consultation this early on a water resources plan. Normally, the process is that the options are worked up to much more detail and then consulted on a draft plan, and that stage will come later this year. So for all of the regional water bodies, we've decided to consult at an earlier stage, obviously in collaboration with national government and the Environment Agency. But it is an early stage consultation, and you will see that when you look through the reports, that we're still very much asking people, have we forgotten anything? What haven't we considered to help us shape the eventual options? Another thing to say is that there are some options where every time we do all the different modelling that we're doing, there's some options that come up over and over again as the ones that we should take forward, that will have very few regrets, and those are mainly options around the reservoirs, which are in South Lincolnshire and the kind of Cambridge Norfolk border, to the Fens Reservoir and the South Links Reservoir, and then around Essex, things like some reuse schemes and desalination. So potentially for Norfolk could just be the Fens Reservoir on the boundaries of Norfolk. The other thing I wanted to highlight is that the water companies themselves believe they can get demand reduction down to 120 litres per head per day, but it is believed that if everyone gets involved, if we have collective action, and particularly if government does look to make some changes, that could be reduced fairly easily down to 110 litres per head per day. But that 120 is what the water companies think they can achieve if they're doing it alone. I should say that I can't see if anyone's got hands up, so if anyone wants to ask a question as we go through, you'll need to just interrupt me.
I'll manage that for you.
Brilliant. Yeah, I can't really see faces or anything at the moment. So, okay, so this is really just to illustrate that there's a number of different pathways that we can take. So on the demand management is in red at the bottom. This isn't a definite thing to say, hey, we're going to just do this in 2025 and this in 2035. It's just to kind of show that we have to consider this in phases, I mentioned before. And the Fens reservoirs are already being progressed. They have been considered as options that really must go ahead. And that the sooner the better, given that they're going to take so long to bring forward. But after that, the green and the red arrows, so the green and the orange arrows, sorry. So the environmental needs, desires and ambitions of our region will significantly influence what path we take after 2035. And that's because all the time we're learning more about what's needed from engagement and modelling, and that's going to put us in a position where we need to make some quite difficult choices potentially, which I'll touch on in my next slide. And then as we progress through those options based on those environmental choices, things like climate change and if the growth projections are achieved, so those things we'll be monitoring very closely. That will then look to and that will then influence the later stage of the plan. So it's absolutely essential that we take an adaptive approach. We've got to plan a huge range of options, and we've got to track all the time what's going on to try and work out which paths we should take. So it's quite a careful kind of balancing act, because ultimately we're trying to find a solution that balances economic need with environmental sustainability, and that is quite a job, but it's very important to us to try as hard as we can on that. Okay, so just wanted to touch briefly on some of the trade-offs. This is the slide that doesn't always get showed, to be honest. This is the slide that is something we need to be clearer with people about. Now, there are going to be trade-offs on a very simple level. If water companies stop abstracting from chalk streams and from the groundwater aquifers under the chalk streams, that water supply for homes and businesses still needs to come from somewhere else. So that water could come from coastal environments, which would have its own environmental implications in coastal environments where potentially we maybe just don't know as much about the ecosystems there. It could come from use of farmland, so removing farmland from the agricultural sector and using large scale amounts of land for agriculture. And there's always a risk of things like trees being removed and other implications. And we have to be really honest about that. And you as our stakeholders have to be aware of the implications of that. It's like anything in the planning world, there's always a balance. So in previous parts of the planning process, we've worked up a couple of different scenarios, and we engaged with customers, a number of customer events, largely led by Anglian Water, and highlighted things like 9 out of 10 customers are willing to pay more for environmental improvements, but not at any price. Customers were generally unaware of environmental damage due to over-abstraction. When it's explained to them, they do want to see rivers restored. So generally awareness is quite low. But when people is discussed with people, they then want to kind of understand more and they want to see rivers restored. But interestingly, scenario 3, which is the one that costs the most but has improved ecological conditions across all of the rivers within the region, was not deemed sufficient by many to sacrifice other elements of the environment. And so some people who chose the improved scenario initially, once they'd been talked through the different options, the details of the plan and the trade-offs, then switched back to the restore option. Now that's just really high level customer feedback. It just gives you an example of some of the things that we have to consider as we take this journey forward together. Okay. So as I said, the plan is very much a work in progress. We have got a number of areas that we need to continue to clarify and understand. Agricultural supply is a big one. Water is an absolutely essential component of the energy sector, for whether it's nuclear, hydrogen or other. Water is very much needed in their processes. There's a few areas where housing growth calculations need to be better understood by us or need refining. There's obviously emerging risks all the time from abstraction license reviews. So things like the Restoring Sustainable Abstraction program that took place in Norfolk around the Bure and the Ant Valley, understanding some of the implications for those sources and where abstraction might have to be ceased. And we also really want to understand the catchments on a more local level. So not just the needs of the environment, but the desires of the sector and the need for environmental restoration, protection and enhancements, the implications on our natural capital assets, for example. And it's really important to us that as WRE that we don't just consider traditional grey infrastructure. We want to make sure that in the coming years, and don't forget that the regional plan, even once it's complete, will then start up again to look, it'll be kind of regularly reviewed, just like the water resource management plans are, which sit below that. These plans are reviewed regularly, so this is an ongoing process working with people. We want over time to ensure that we're learning as much as possible about the region and bringing in innovation and trying to find methods that are more and more sustainable as we progress. Okay, so just something that I wanted to make everyone aware of is in terms of the hierarchy of plans. So the regional plan sits at the whole region level, so that's the map on in front of you. And then in our region, the regional plan is looking at regional scale infrastructure, so very significant scale. So the infrastructure has to produce over 10 megalitres per day of water to be in the regional plan. Then under that, there's the water company's own water resource management plans, and they will look at supply options that are smaller than that and that can be delivered within their region. So it could be smaller scale versions of the same things. It could be lots of transfers and more local solutions. But then there's another gap below that at the really local level. So drilling right down into specific catchments one at a time, really understanding whether there's something that could be done locally, maybe for a collection of farmers who actually needs water much nearer to them. They don't necessarily want to be supplied by a desalination plant, or maybe it's, maybe there's something more efficient that we could do local to them that would then reduce the size of some grey infrastructure needed elsewhere. So the regional plan is tackling that high level, but then it's also tackling that low level, that lower level of detail. But in the middle, there is the water company's plans. And the water company plans are also having a consultation period at the moment. There's a number of workshops going on. And if the group aren't aware of those, then I will send through some information after this, because I think it's important for Norfolk to understand what's going on at all of those scales. And the water companies will probably at the moment have the most detail on a Norfolk specific level. So we want to start to drill down to a catchment level as well and understand what can happen within, what options there are at a much smaller scale. And as part of doing that, we want to, we've done a number of other projects that have been commissioned to feed into the regional plan. And this for us is about innovation and learning. So there's some work around financing, for example. How do you finance multi-sector infrastructure? So these reservoirs, for example, probably won't just be for water supply. They might be for recreation or flood risk benefits. But some of those things can't currently be funded by water companies. So there's quite a lot of research to do around that. There's also a partnership in the Fens, some work, Water for Tomorrow, which is in the Broadland catchment in Norfolk, and Cameo, and the Norfolk strategy that I'll talk about in a moment. Some work we're specifically doing with the Gulf and kind of horse racing sector to look at how they water their green space and how we can consider other solutions for them. And then our systematic conservation planning, which is about making the most of opportunities for biodiversity within schemes. The number of different projects, as well as all the standard traditional modelling that goes into developing an infrastructure plan that is feeding our regional plan. And that, I think, is what we feel, makes us, kind of shows that we're trying to do our best. We really are looking to broaden out and try to test as many things as possible. I'm not going to go in detail through the next slides. I just wanted to show you that they're here and you can look at them in the presentation. But just to give you some examples, so the Future Fens is a partnership in the Fens that recognises the scale of work and infrastructure that's going to be needed in the Fens in the future. And this is about coming together to consider flood risk, water supply, and other factors like green space in a collaborative way, and really looking to put this forefront in some of the decisions that are made towards the west of Norfolk. So that's a project that we're pursuing. And it's probably fair to say, and you'll see this from my examples, that quite a lot of the catchment drilling down and the catchment focus in the Water Resources East region is actually in Norfolk, which you'll be pleased to hear. So we will be putting Norfolk under a lot more scrutiny than maybe some of the other areas of our region. We're kind of using Norfolk in many cases as the pilot, parts of Norfolk or all of Norfolk as parts of our pilots. We also have a project called Water for Tomorrow, which is running in, as I said, Cameo. It's actually in East Suffolk and in the Broadland catchment. And this is about making sure that within the region, people have a really good collective understanding of all the implications and things that are needed to deliver sustainable water supply. I'm not going to go in, as I said, into detail about these, but happy to provide more information afterwards. But so Water for Tomorrow is about engaging with abstraction, looking at how things can be real time, how we can really get understanding from all the different communities and businesses that use water. And basically, we're kind of rerunning the regional modelling process at a local catchment level in the Broadlands catchments. There's quite a lot of modelling going on there to come up with some more locally specific catchment management solutions, and that's part of an Interreg project. And then my programme that I am working on is called the Norfolk Water Strategy, but it's very much a programme about testing nature-based solutions. So we're looking at how nature within a catchment, working across an entire catchment, can deliver benefits for all different parts of water management, as well as other benefits like improving biodiversity, climate change mitigation, for example. And so we're looking to test nature-based solutions to see what is possible within the world of water supply, and also to develop a collaborative or collective action platform that brings partners together in Norfolk to tackle some of the challenges to delivering nature-based solutions at scale. We're not talking about lots of small localized projects that take place at the moment. They're all excellent projects. What we want to do is scale them up. So we want to understand what the challenges are, how we can work together to tackle those challenges, whether they're technical, financial, policy, for example, bring everyone together into an action platform. And then we're doing a lot of work around mobilising funding and looking to bring funding into the region to deliver those nature-based solutions. And for the regional plan, this is about whether we can have an alternative to traditional infrastructure, whether we can mitigate some of the trade-offs of grey infrastructure, or whether we can support and improve the delivery of grey infrastructure. Right, I'm going to skip the slides based on time. So just to summarise, there is a water crisis today. We're short of water now, and if nothing changes, that shortage will get worse. We're predicting that by 2050, the region could require around double the amount of water. So as I said, that's double we need to find that same amount again. It's not necessarily that demand has increased. We can meet a lot through water efficiency, but not all of it. So it's an essential element, but it won't deliver everything. So significant new infrastructure will be required. And we're starting with the options that came out very clearly from the modelling, which is the reservoirs. The final plan is to be completed in autumn 2023. There's a draft later this year, and we want to work with everyone to understand those water needs and the desires at a catchment level as well as the regional level. So if you refer to the consultation document, and there's a link in the presentation, which I'll also send out to everyone, there's a number of questions that we're asking, and we would really like your input. We'd really like to understand if you think we've missed anything, if there's technical or community-based considerations that we've not borne in mind. And this is really about helping us to co-create this plan. And there's some timelines there which you'll be able to actually read when you get this sent out to you, but just shows you the whole process right through to September 23 to publication of the plan. So this last slide, when I send this out, this has the links to the regional plan and to the survey response form. So really it's for me just to encourage you to look at that plan, to ask us any questions, emailing us at contact@wre.org.uk if you have questions. And also I'll send out the information about the water resource management plans for Anglian Water, which are being prepared along a similar timeline. So a lot of this information feeds into them, but they're also progressing things at a more detailed level, which is more specific to Norfolk. So really now is the time to engage on both of those, and the consultation for the regional plan ends as the 23rd of February, I believe. Sorry, just going to start coughing there. I'll just pause there. Thank you very much for listening, and please do ask if you've got any questions.
Julia, I think Councillor Clark raised his hand during the presentation.
Okay, go for it.
Calling Graham.
Oh, hello there. Sorry about that. Trying to unblock myself. It's a very comprehensive plan that you're putting together here, but I didn't hear anything about climate change involved in this, and water levels rising and sea levels rising and threats to the coast, etc., etc. So And these are short-term issues that we're having to deal with as well. We have got local plans. I mean, even around the Norwich area, we're talking about another 40,000, 50,000 houses, which would need sewage, which would need water as well. If you're saying in your presentation here that there's not going to be enough water going forward, or we're going to need double the amount going forward, then how are we talking to the farmers who particularly do a bit of abstraction and have been told that they're about 14 have been told that they need to stop abstracting in the near future, but are they allowed to dig personal reservoirs on their land? Is that part of the land of water management as well, that we need water for farming in the area? Are local farmers, apart from your major reservoirs, allowed to dig personal reservoirs in their areas, or joint reservoirs for multi-farms in the same area? Is that part of the plan, or is it?
Okay. Right, fine. There's a number of points there, if that's okay, that I'll pick up. So first of all, climate change is absolutely included in the plan. I really could have talked to you for about 2 hours straight, but I had to kind of really shrink everything down, so I didn't just talk at you for ages. So I really apologise if I didn't cover everything. So climate change is absolutely essential. It is one of the significant pressures on the region. So as a result, we're running and trying to understand climate change models at the same as we're trying to understand cost models, for example. Because we recognise that as we progress forward to 2050, we'll see more and more impacts. And we strongly believe that the impacts of climate change are usually felt through water first, so through flood risk or drought. So it's absolutely fundamental to us and to our solutions. And if water is, going to be very quickly evaporating, for example, we are going to need to replenish those supplies. In terms of the solutions, our belief as a company is that we will be able to provide the water, so the water will not be a barrier to economic growth. That was why I wanted to make you aware of the trade-offs, because there will be some trade-offs that we will have to consider and that we will want to consult on as we go forwards. But through measures like the reservoirs and potentially a number of desalination plants along the coast, very large volumes of water can be produced. Now, the important factor you said there was some of the timelines. So some of that infrastructure can't be delivered for quite a number of years. And in some ways, we wouldn't even want to be able to deliver desalination until we know that a way can be found for desalination to be less carbon intensive. So there's a need for innovation in some of the things we're relying on, and that's part of our adaptive process. So there's a number of things that we're considering. One is, what can we do in the short term? And that's where some of our more catchment focused projects come in. So when I didn't describe in detail what they are, but nature-based solutions, for example, can be anything from naturally recharging the aquifers to creating large amounts of storage to using wetlands to treat water so it can then be reused for irrigation. So a lot of those options can potentially be delivered on a much shorter timescale. So that's one of the avenues we're looking at to see if we can deliver more local solutions, for example, as you say, for farmers. We're also looking across Norfolk as part of that Norfolk nature-based solution work. We're looking to try a model of a collaborative action platform, which is where we bring partners from all different sectors together to understand what different things we could do if we work together. And we're already piloting that in the Ant Valley. So the Ant Valley is the area where Norfolk has been most hit to date, or currently is being hit with the need for abstraction licenses to be ceased by 2024. There's 31 abstraction licenses affected, which is a really significant impact on those farmers. So Water Resources East has been working with the Environment Agency, Natural England, the NFU, CLA, and the farmers and landowners themselves to bring together quite a detailed action plan and a number of, we've got a strategic group and a delivery group developing this action plan so that we've got an infrastructure plan for those farmers. And we're working with them on things like the high level, what policy changes might be needed to enable them to be able to deliver some of this infrastructure locally. There are some policy barriers potentially. We're trying to make the planning process and the licensing process much clearer. So we're working very closely with the Broads Authority and Norfolk District Council, which have been doing some excellent work to try and make the planning process more open to people, just to understand what the process for reservoir planning is and how that aligns with the licensing process from the Environment Agency. And then we're also looking for costs of reservoirs and can those reservoirs be designed in a way that it, is more likely to get planning permission because it has more consideration of the landscape in which it's going to be embedded and environmental factors, and what will they cost, and then how can we fund that? So there's a lot of research obviously doing around funding, and a lot of discussion at a very high level with DEFRA and the Rural Payments Agency around some of the grants that they've just started issuing to farmers, not issuing the grants that can be applied for. There is a lot of work to do, but absolutely we do want people to consider local options. If water needs to be delivered more sustainably and more locally to farmers, and that's more use and maybe more efficient than having huge pipelines from a desalination plant, then all the options, we have a huge modelling system at the moment that balances all these out. So if one factor can be reduced, something else can be increased, and vice versa. So it's a very kind of careful balancing exercise, but all the options are on the table and all of them need to be considered, and local solutions are just as, if not more important in the short term than these very large scale significant infrastructure. Does that answer all your questions?
It does in part. I think there is something called the Norfolk Flood Alliance as well, which is looking at all the flooding that's occurring across the county. And again, it's difficult to comprehend that we have a flooding issue where water is being wasted to a great extent, and then we have another issue where capacity and saving water is another element. So it needs a plan to try and how can I say, capture some of that water.
Yeah, absolutely. So we do attend the Norfolk Strategic Flood Alliance meetings, and that element of storage in the longer term, whether it's lots of small elements of storage or whether it's bigger areas of storage, is absolutely important, because we agree that it makes no sense, does it, to discharge all of that water to sea when there's people struggling for that water inland. So a lot of our work is focused on that intra-year variability, so the too much and too little water, and trying to make sure it's not a barrier to growth. And it is something we're very much trying to do, is to kind of bring all of that together into the regional plan. Please have a look at the consultation documents. I think you'll find it is very much a journey in progress, but that is our aim by the time we get to the draft plan, to have knitted all of those things together. And that's why we'll be now moving much more into a local catchment focus, to make sure we're knitting stuff in at the right level. So when we build up, when we pull ourselves back to the regional level, we've got a more comprehensive and holistic plan.
Thank you, Julia.
Thank you.
Good, thanks very much. I'd like to endorse what Graham said about, making sure that the balance between residential use and commercial and industrial use. We talk about farmers as if they're sort of public guardians, but they are part of the industrial economy. Okay, it's outside, but it's no different to making a car, building widgets, jet engines, or whatever. It is part of the underpinning industrial output of the east of England. So we shouldn't just think that they're whipping boys. They're protecting our environment to the largest extent, but they're also some of the best grade 1 land is here, and it's got to be used. You say, Julia, that we're going to get down to 110 litres per day per dwelling house. I mean, that does seem rather heroic, and I think it's going to be really incumbent on all of us. You can't save your way to a profit. It's something I've said before. We're going to have to increase supply, and winter capture is going to have to be an important part of that, and bringing stuff from reservoirs in the fens over to Norwich is one of the things that's going to have to be considered.
Yeah, absolutely.
There we are. Right. So the sort of concept of the water grid. I'm conscious that the Kielder Reservoir in the northeast of England was sort of built, to support the steel mills and the car factories and everything else, the mining industry of the northeast, just as it all fell away. So they've got far too much water. It's probably too much to think there'll be a water pipeline from the Kielder down to Norfolk, but using the rivers and grids is going to be an essential part of the mix, because if this is all going to be about relying on us getting down to 110 litres per day and no water from farmers, then this isn't a plan that anyone can sign up to. So,
I mean, our plan absolutely isn't going to say there's no water for farmers. That's something that we want to overcome together and work together with all sectors, whether it's food processing, agriculture, industry, to do that. And the point of the regional water bodies is very much to make sure that at a national level there is more connection, because previously water companies were working in isolation and one person thought they could get water from somewhere else and someone else wasn't willing to give it. So that coordination is now there, which is a relief.
Good, thank you for that. Okay, so just help in the few moments that remain. There's a consultation coming. Do you have the precise dates for that consultation, and how long is it going to last, or some of the boilerplate around that, please?
Yeah, absolutely. So the consultation started on the 17th of January, and it runs until the 23rd of February. And I will send all of the direct links now to Zoo, to our colleague, to Ninan, to send them out to you guys, and then and also send the information about the Water Resource Management Plan workshops that Anglian Water is running.
Okay, that's good. Well, thank you very much indeed. We've run a little bit over, but everyone's attention was gripped, so thank you for that, Julia. We've given a moment for people to ask some questions. I haven't seen any on the chat, so I think we can consider ourselves well updated. I'm very grateful to you, Julia. So thank you for that update.
Thank you.
Everyone's got an action on themselves to keep an eye out for the consultation and get it in the appropriate manner. Thank you.
Thank you ever so much.
Good. Well, you're welcome to stay, but if you don't, you'll be excused. There we are.
Thank
Good.
you.
Okay. So let's move on now. I see Trevor's put his light on. So here we go. Trevor, there's a report which has been distributed in advance. How many pages? Oh, 3 or 4 pages. So do you want to lead us through it and pick out some highlights? I think we can take it as read, but
Yep.
over you. The health one in particular is of interest to me, but there we are. Over to you.
Okay, thanks. I will briefly go through my report and pick out some of the sort of key points. So we'll start with the GI-RAMS study first. So there's sort of 3 elements to that. We're currently waiting for feedback from a number of local authorities on the statement of common ground that we're trying to put together on a county-wide basis. We are hoping we're nearly there with the wording for that. We've got support from Natural England. They are content with what it says. But I would encourage those last remaining authorities that haven't given feedback to let us know as soon as possible whether they...
So what's the deadline for that, Trevor?
Well, I would really like that by the end of this week if it's at all possible, but obviously we have to work with people's restrictions. But yeah, it would be good to have that as soon as we can. Moving on, the other work that we need to do around GI-RAMS. So we've got government arrangements to sort out around the fund. These are being drawn up by a small steering group, which will create terms of reference for the overarching board. We're looking to also create a job description for the delivery officer role that we've talked about before. And we're in discussions with the county around them becoming the accountable body for this and the hosting organisation for the resource. So that work's ongoing. We've also got to commission a new study, which we've discussed in December. So we're currently finalising a brief for that work. I just wanted to highlight that West Suffolk are interested in joining the study, and obviously that will help to cover the costs of the work. The idea of this is so that it covers the whole of the Brex area, which obviously makes some sense. And we're going to talk to West Suffolk about how we could potentially include them within the study in the next week or so. We're looking to put out a tender for the study once the brief has been fully agreed. So that's the GI-RAMS side of things. In terms of the health that you mentioned, so my report highlights that the planning and health protocol is being reviewed. We set that up in, well, the newest version is 2009. The idea of the protocol, for anyone that doesn't know, is it's like an engagement tool between local planning authorities and the health community to make sure that we've got ongoing engagement around appropriate health infrastructure and ensuring that there's principles of health and well-being in local plans and when determining planning applications. So we're currently reviewing the engagement processes that we currently use. We're also trying to update the protocol itself to reflect the changes within the National Health Service structures that there have been recently. And we also wanted to include something around promoting good health in the planning system as well, to make sure we design new developments have health in mind. So in terms of the review, the protocol focuses on a number of key points: updating those health structures to represent how they currently work, check the current engagement process and get feedback on how it's working at the moment, I think a key element of this is the health infrastructure delivery plan. So we want to ensure that the health teams that we work with help us pull together these infrastructure delivery plans that really highlight what infrastructure is needed to support the growth in the county. Building in the key principles of design as well, so making sure that healthy design and healthy developments are sort of encouraged when they come forward. We want to review the role of health health infrastructure assessment plans as well, and how they can be used within developments which are being brought forward. And also, obviously, we want to consider the implications of the pandemic as well. That's health. Does anyone have some questions on the health side of things?
Yeah, I've certainly got a question, if you don't mind, Trevor.
Yeah.
We've as part of this work, and knowing that SIL is excluded from this, we've had an opportunity to have some engagement with developers on quite a large site to make some sort of contribution towards GP surgeries and other sort of primary care things. And for the first time we used it, it was a 200 house development, an uplift, a concentration on a previous consent. In other words, they can squeeze a few more houses in. The gross value increase of the value of the land, because they effectively made land, was about 7 million quid. And the uplift for the doctor's surgery was 150 grand. Well, that doesn't even pay a doctor for a year, let alone provide any material. And I do think that, and I know there's been some work on this, and every development is sort of has its own merits, and it's all difficult to create hard rules. But 150 grand for a 200 house development as a contribution towards primary care was pathetic, really, and also materially less than the uplift in the value of the land, which is 7 million. I think so. I think we probably are going to have to revisit the tariff, if that's the right word. I know there are other mouths to feed with SIL and Section 106, but certainly anecdotally and on the doorstep, the man in the street, the people who elect us and have reasonable expectations as residents, are complaining there isn't enough, there just aren't enough doctors' surgeries, they can't get an appointment. And I know there's other reasons in the health economy for that, but any tariff is going to have to be revisited, because at the very first outing in South Norfolk, certainly, it was found considerably wanting.
Yes, absolutely, and that's the sort of reason why we want to review how it's currently working. We appreciate that it's the hoodoo model that they called it, and we appreciate that is a kind of a number crunching exercise, which isn't always going to give you the results that you want to do. And we are relying on the health service to provide us with additional input on what is required and on what they actually need per development. And I think that's where the health infrastructure delivery plans can really come in, because they will set out exactly what's required. I think it's good to think of them in a similar way to, we're really good at knowing what schools and what roads we need to deliver the housing that we've got, but we don't really know what health infrastructure we need. And those health infrastructure delivery plans will help to understand that in much more detail.
Good. Okay. So there's that. I'm looking for questions in the chat. I don't see anyone, so I'll plough on.
Okay, I've got a couple of other areas I just wanted to raise.
Please, go ahead. Yeah, please go ahead.
I just wanted to highlight, you did touch upon it earlier, but the Transport East consultation is currently underway, and I just wanted to highlight there's only a week of that left now. So this is the last sort of opportunity for local authorities to comment on the Transport East plan. I think they've had something like 380 comments back so far, but they're really keen to make sure they hear from every district authority. So please do make sure you respond if you can.
This is the right moment to turn to Graham Plant, just to nudge us if we still haven't quite got there. What are the key messages you'd like us to deliver, Graham?
Thank you, John. Well, definitely, if you've got a local plan coming up and you've got some infrastructure in there that's needed, it needs to be in the Transport East plan as well. I mean, I represent the district on the Transport East, but certainly, as far as I'm concerned, Yarmouth's put in its element, if you like. It desperately needs to make sure that every district council in Norfolk has made a comment into that transport strategy, because if they haven't, they can't expect anything in the future. If they suddenly find they have a housing development or a factory site being put up that they already know about, and they haven't got the infrastructure plan in place to, or the strategic infrastructure plan in place. Because you've got to remember, the Transport East is strategic, so it's got to be something that's major. We're not talking about little side roads and this kind of business. What we're talking about is access to their businesses and to their new, how can I put it, their new housing as well. It'll be in the local transport, in the local plans. But if you want something strategic, it needs to be in the Transport East plan. So I would encourage anybody in the district who's got a comment to make on this and an ask to get it in there now, so it can be built into a plan for the next 5 to 10 years.
So by way of action then, Nina, is it possible for you just to have a bit of a phone round or email round just to make sure that all the windows are smashed on this, so everyone has a go? You say there's a week to go, Trevor?
Yes, there is. Yeah.
Okay, so I mean, I think now is the time to have a...
Trevor, do we know how many haven't written into that?
I haven't been given figures for districts. No, I only knew the overall total, but I think some were considering it, but they haven't done as of yet. I know, I think Norwich are in that position, but I'm not. I don't know each individual district. Apologies, no.
Okay,
well, Graham's making a good point.
That's David Cummings to do a round robin as well, just to make sure that we've got everything in there.
As long as someone does it, so that every district has the opportunity to contribute, as you've said, Graham. I think that's fine. So I think you were just about to move on to another one there, Trevor. Was it the older person's accommodation support needs study?
Yes, I just wanted to highlight on that we've now got the final study. I was hoping to send it out with the paperwork for this meeting, but unfortunately we have to make sure it meets compatibility requirements before it can be hosted on council websites, and there were just some issues that we needed to resolve around that. But hopefully we can send that out in the next week or so, and then that piece of work will be complete. As you mentioned earlier, Jessamy went through that in some detail at the December meeting, so I don't think there's much need to go into it anymore, but obviously the report's there to read, and if there's any issues, then by all means do let me know.
Yeah, and I think it's quite timely. I noticed in Halston, McCarthy and Stone are bringing forward a proposal for supported needs as well. I believe that one might even be outside the development boundary. So, it's important we get a policy basis so we know how to judge these as and when they come in. I see that Julia's just put some stuff in the chat, but that's relates to the previous item. Okay, are there any comments on the older person support needs study? Safe to say, when's that? How and when is that going to be published or circulated when it's been QA/QC'd?
Well, we will send it out to the group, and it will also go on the member forum website that we have, which the county host. So that'll be made available, and everyone will be made aware of it. Okay,
so has everyone paid their subs, Trevor?
The subs are due for the next financial year, so we won't collect them until April. Fair enough. But...
We'll name and shame them if they haven't paid by May then. Okay, are there any other comments on this? Melanie, we're going to look at health, mental health facilities. Yeah, we're not the health service, Melanie, but this is about primary care directly related to development, large development pressures, rather than the generality of how we're going to fund the health service. I think if we get sucked into that, I think we'll never get there. Right, okay, so that was a little input on the chat. So that's done you, Trevor, on our agenda item number 4. Now, Neenan, let's go on to number 5 in the 7 minutes that remain. So, neighbouring counties update, please.
Yeah, I'm just doing a quick update on behalf of Suffolk, who have sent their apologies, basically just saying that, so in summary, East Suffolk plans have adopted, and they're now working on SPDs. Baber and Mid Suffolk joint local plans will now be split into 2 parts as a result of that examination. Part 1, which contains strategic and